this is an unprecedented case where an American citizen is approved for killing without a trial. I guess if we'd listened to Dennis Blair, the director of national intelligence, back in February, we should have known this was coming. But now that we do have this very first example, what kind of a dangerous precedent has been set? Joining me from our New York studio, I have Kevin Williamson, the deputy managing editor for the National Review. Kevin, thanks for joining me. My very first question is, can we clarify, is there any way for us to know that this really is the first example of such of a targeted killing of an American citizen?
No, there's really no way to know. These lists are classified. The government doesn't make that information public. So it's everyone's best guess that this is the first serious case like this, but there's no way to know for sure now.
And when it comes to Al-Awlaki's case specifically, is there any burden of proof? Is there something specific that the government states would make him worth killing?
Well, and that really gets to the heart of the matter, because there's really not a question of proof when you're talking about an act of war. When you're talking about a military campaign, you don't fight a military campaign the way you fight or the way you prosecute a trial in a criminal court or something like that. But the question is, is this fellow actually out there, under arms, being killed in a war zone or something like that, which is one thing, but being targeted beforehand for what amounts to an assassination outside of the legal system, outside of being charged, outside of being brought back to the country, is, I think, a very problematic thing when you're talking about a United States citizen.
Well, exactly, because, there also have been a lot of rumors that from the past, Dick Cheney also had an entire assassination list when they were fighting the war on terror. But now that this is directed towards an American...
I don't believe that's actually probably true.
Well, I'm just saying that I think now people are probably reacting more because this is an American citizen. But should they? Or do you think Americans really care?
Well, yes, of course they should. I mean, the relevant question here is how the United States government interacts with its citizens. When you're talking about fighting an organization like Al-Qaeda, when you're talking about fighting Islamic terrorists, you're willing to give your covert operations a pretty free hand. You're willing to let them do a lot of things when they're operating overseas, operating with foreign nationals. But it is a legitimate thing for United States citizens to ask ourselves if we want the government to have this sort of power when it comes to someone who's a United States citizen, even if he's not in the country, even if he is actively working for terrorist ends with a national enemy. And I think the answer to that question is probably no. You don't want to be assassinating United States citizens.
And absolutely, what kind of a dangerous precedent does that now set? Because if we just say that these people are a threat to national security, well, that definitely is a very vague statement. And how many more people could they apply it to next?
Sure. I mean, there's always that issue. If you look at the way the Interstate Commerce Clause, for instance, has been redefined over the years to cover things that are neither interstate nor commerce, it's entirely possible to imagine the rubric of national security being cited in situations that don't really have anything to do with national security, that don't have anything to do with any legitimate end of the government. And so it is, I think, worth it to look at limiting those sorts of things and to have some sort of review process in place. And the problem here is that everything is within the executive branch. You're talking about the military, the intelligence operations, the White House, and the rest of the executive making these decisions by themselves with very little oversight, with very little input from Congress or anyone else. So, and again, when you're talking about the question of how the government deals with its own citizens, and those things really come into play much more, I think, than they do when you're talking about if you're dealing with someone who's a Pakistani national or a Yemeni national or someone else.
But if we're going to talk about the president, the broader strategy from the Obama administration has seemed to be that they've switched from capturing to killing people. Do we think that that's because fewer questions will be asked if they can kick someone or kill somebody without then having to deal with the legal repercussions?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure about that. Eric Holder, the Attorney General, did a really weird thing a couple of weeks ago where someone asked him if we captured Osama bin Laden, would we read him his Miranda rights and treat him like a criminal defendant? And his answer to that question was, well, we'll be reading his Miranda rights to his dead body, making the point that even if we came across the guy, we wouldn't capture him, we would just kill him on sight, which again to me is much less problematic given that he's not a United States citizen. But it does seem like that they are moving toward a model of killing more than capturing, because there are so many ramifications of capturing people, of holding prisoners. There have been so many problems and questions that have been brought up by our methods of holding prisoners, by our interrogations, and the rest of those things. And those things are entirely legitimate, and they're things that are worth doing and necessary to do in any war. I mean, we've held millions of prisoners in our wars in the past, And that's something that countries just do. There's nothing inherently wrong or problematic about that. But Obama, came to power on the anti-war movement. He came to power on the anti-war argument, which highly politicized the methods for which we are dealing with those prisoners. And I think it is easier for the administration in some circumstances just to say, well, we're just going to knock these guys off and not bother bringing them in. I think that's a counterproductive thing to do, because certainly if you had someone like bin Laden, you would want to interrogate him. You would want to know what he knows. You would want to hold him as a prisoner for a while. But the administration seems to be moving away from that model of doing things.
All right, Kevin, I want to thank you very much for your input. Reports have come out today that the Obama administration has put an American citizen on a targeted kill list for his associations with al-Qaeda, and he's said to be hiding in Yemen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My topic for this evening is now it's assassinations. What have we allowed ourselves to become? Are we no longer a nation of laws? Have we become instead a nation of men who make secret arrests? Are secret prisons now simply another tool of the federal government law enforcement? Is secret rendition of individuals now permitted out of misplaced fear? Have we decided that the writ of habeas corpus is not worth defending? Is torture now an acceptable tool for making us safe? Unfortunately, the single answer to all of these questions from the leaders of our country and to many of our citizens appears to be yes. And now we are told that assassination of foreigners as well as American citizens is legitimate and necessary to provide security for our people. It is my firm opinion that nothing could be further from the truth. Secret arrests, secret renditions, torture, and assassinations are illegal under both domestic and international law. These activities should be anathema to the citizens of a constitutional republic. The real threat doesn't arise from our failure to torture, rather desensitizing our nation to the willful neglect and sacrifice of our civil liberties fought and died for over the centuries is the threat. The concept of habeas corpus existed even before King John of England was forced in 1215 by his rebellious barons to sign the Magna Carta. This basic principle and expression of individual liberty, which has survived 800 years, greatly influenced the writing of our Constitution and our common law heritage. Today, we hardly hear a whimper, either from the American people or a stone silent U.S. government, as our cherished liberties are eradicated. Instead, we have a government that deliberately orchestrates needless fear and makes people insecure enough to ignore the reality of their lost liberties. The latest outrage is the current administration's acknowledgement that we now have a policy that permits assassination not only of foreign suspects, but of American citizens as well. Of course, the CIA has used secret assassinations in a limited fashion for decades, despite international, domestic, and moral law. When done secretly, as in the past, our government at least recognized that assassination was illegal and wrong. Frighteningly and astonishingly, however, the policy is now explicit. National Intelligence Director Dennis Blair, in open testimony before the House Intelligence Committee on February 3rd of this year, acknowledged that American citizens can indeed be assassinated at our government's discretion. The U.S. government attempted to assassinate Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen without even charging him with a crime. We're told this evidence is secret, that he does not deserve any constitutional rights, and that some unknown individual in the administration has the authority to declare him a threat, and therefore a legitimate target for assassination. Yes, I know he is probably a very bad person. Yes, I know that only a few Americans are on the assassination hit list. Yes, I know that artificially generated fear makes a large number of Americans inclined to applaud this effort, which supposedly will make us safe. But if this could become standard operating procedure and a permanent precedent is established, let me assure you that this abuse of the law will spread. It's time for Congress and the American people to wake up to the realities of the dangers we face. We must remember as members of Congress that we have taken an oath to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. It should not be that difficult to distinguish the difference between the danger posed by the underwear bomber and the danger posed by a government that endorses secret prisons, torture, and assassinating American citizens. And I yield back the balance of my time.